Welcome to today's episode of the Declutter Hub podcast, your channel for super easy, no-nonsense advice on how to declutter and organise your home. Please welcome your hosts, professional organisers Ingrid Jansen and Leslie Spellman.
Hello and welcome listeners to episode 98 of the Declutter Hub podcast. I'm Ingrid.
And I'm Leslie.
If you have clutter and want to sort it out, this is the show for you. Now in today's episode, Leslie and I are talking about 10 things to declutter from your garage. It is summer and it's time to get these outdoor jobs done. Now, we had some lovely feedback from one of our Facebook group members that she listened to our podcast about 10 things to declutter immediately, and she got completely inspired and started taking action. So Leslie and I have done several podcasts about 10 things, and we're creating a bit of a series here, aren't we, Leslie?
I know people seem to like them, don't they? 10 things. It's kind of easy and attainable, isn't it? I think that's the reason.
Yes, that's for sure. So today's episode, we thought, okay, what should we do? We thought, a garage, it's kind of such a dumping ground, isn't it? So, but it's really an important part of your house, and to make sure that the rest of your house flows well, it's important to get that garage sorted. Now, it doesn't matter if it's separate or if it's under your house or next to your house or a loose kind of garage at the back of your garden. It doesn't really matter where it is, but it's a place where we store much more than our car, don't we, Leslie?
Yeah, do you actually remember when garages were things that you parked cars in? That tends not to be the case anymore. For most houses, they tend to be an overflow storage area, don't they?
You know what? We end up collecting so much stuff that we think, okay, well, let's put it in the garage. And at one point, there comes a moment when you're like, my car actually doesn't fit in there anymore. This is not good.
To be fair, there are other places. I mean, I've not got a garage in my house, but I have got other storage areas that I put the same types of things that I would put in a garage. And so it just depends. And so it's interchangeable. This could be a basement, it could be a shed, it could be anywhere where you bulk store items, I think is what we're talking about today. And once we start talking about the 10 things, you'll know whether you've got them in your house or not.
Yes, definitely. Because some of our suggestions are maybe no-brainers to you, while other things you think, oh gosh, I haven't even realized that. That's not been on my radar at all. So let's get cracking then, Leslie. What is the first thing on our list?
Well, I think there's a little bit of an out of sight, out of mind. And most people want to look after their house first and get that orderly. And so whether it's a loft, a basement or a garage, we tend to put things in a temporary position until we get to the next stage of doing something with them. And a classic one for this is stuff that is waiting to go to the tip, the recycling centre or the charity shop, isn't it?
I know this from experience. We recently did a garage declutter ourselves in this house, and there was a whole section with stuff that had to go to the tip. So, of course, it was a bit longer there than normal because, of course, we've just had lockdown and the tips were closed. The recycling centers were all closed. So, and we had been sorting out several parts in our house. So we created this area with stuff ready to go out, but we couldn't just bring it just yet. So we were gathering it all together, and it grows. That mountain just grew and grew. And I was a bit like, oh my gosh, we need to go to the tip. We need to go to the recycling center. These things have to leave this house.
So I will give you a temporary reprieve just because of lockdown. But under normal circumstances, you need to practice what you preach, Ingrid Jansen, and not have piles of stuff in your garage waiting to go to the tip or the charity shop. But yes, I agree that lockdown was tricky for a lot of us in terms of things being closed. It was a bit of like, where's that going to go? I've got like a sort of bin area outside where I put all my dustbins and things. So I shoved it all kind of in there. And then as soon as it was open, it's like, yes, it was exciting times. Almost as exciting as going back to the hairdressers, going to the tip. The vibe, like which one was more important, the hairdressers or the tip. But anyway, so having done both, equal in my world, which is a bit sad really, isn't it?
Well, I think so. If you're listening to this now and think, you know what, you're right, I haven't done that tip run yet. This is your cue from us to you. get that car organized and book that trip. If you still have to book an appointment to go to your recycling center, get that organized, put it in so you can actually make that trip and you can start to clear some space, because it's one of these things that we just see all the time. It's just something that a lot of people just don't get around to. Well, it is so cathartic to put everything, this is leaving my house. So, and we see it all the time, don't we? When we declutter garages, there's a whole pile of stuff. Yeah, I've been meaning to kind of go to the tip. I haven't gotten around to it. Just do it. You will feel so much better after you've been.
The problem is, of course, is when you leave stuff in the garage, you then forget why you left it there, if it's there for a prolonged period of time, and then you kind of don't see it anymore. And then you're like, oh, is that stuff to go to the tip? Or I'm sure that bin bag there was to go to the charity shop, but I can't remember. And then you're nervous about taking it because you have to recheck it. So yeah, stuff waiting to go to the tip is an absolute no-brainer. But what we're going to talk about is another 9 sections of things that actually we're going to add to the stuff going to the tip to take to the tip as well, aren't we, for the most part?
Yeah. We're going to definitely find more stuff to put on that tip pile. That's for sure. Oh my gosh, my absolute thing, Leslie, pieces of wood. That is my bugbear in my house. My husband, I mean, I love him to bits, but he can't get rid of a piece of wood. And I'm like, why is all this wood in my garage? Honestly, it's like, it just drives me absolutely nuts. I got like 2 shelves full of and he's like, well, it's not as much as it used to be, and I do use it. And I'm like, I have never seen him use it. So he's probably done that. I mean, I'm being a bit flippant here, but of course he's been fixing stuff. But why we need to have so much of it? I'm like, can we not just recycle it or something?
For me, the only reason why you would need pieces of wood in your house is A, if you're a joiner or do that for a trade, and B, if you are a really avid DIYer that's doing lots and lots of projects all the time. The rest of us out there is doubtful whether or not you need those pieces of wood in your garage, but they're always kind of tucked behind shelves or on the top of a garage or right at near the door, and they're just kind of annoying, aren't they? They're not always big sheets of wood. They're like little tiny pieces of wood. And they're just, honestly, as soon as that wood goes out of your garage, all of a sudden there's a feeling of calm that comes over the garage straight away, because it's very messy aesthetically, isn't it? These random pieces and selections of wood. So it can be recycled at the recycling centre, the wood. Another option for that is free cycle, because as we know that people will take pieces of wood. So they can take it from your garage and then put it in their garage, but then it's not your problem anymore, is it? So as long as it's out of your house, and that's the most important thing, isn't it? So old pieces of wood, that's a really good one. Now I'm going to go on to the next one, which is my real bugbear in a garage, which is old paint, cans of paint, and or wallpaper. Now let's talk about paint in the first instance. What happens is we keep paint from rooms that we have decorated because we think we might need to touch them up. So question number 1, will you ever touch that paint up? Or if it gets really bad, will you repaint the whole room? If you have a leak, for example, there's a good chance that the insurance is going to pay for that to be fixed, and you're going to repaint the whole room, because it's very hard after that paint has been on a wall to match it up. It's almost a different colour. And then also what happens then is we keep all the paints, and so it's there for 7 or 8 years. And so actually we've repainted the room and we've still got a can of paint from the old colour as well. Yes, if you want to keep some paint from a current colour, that makes sense, a room, but if it's got long gone, then that can go. Now there's loads of fantastic paint recycling projects locally. So just Google recycling paint, fantastic options out there as well for that. And then we've got wallpaper. Ingrid, what's your thoughts on wallpaper?
Now, Leslie, this whole wallpaper thing, I'm completely confused about it. You find these rolls of wallpaper, and I'm like, what's the plan with this? I'm confused. I mean, I must admit, I do not hardly have any wallpaper in my house. I'm not a wallpaper person. So that makes it really tricky, but maybe that's why I don't, but I would love to hear your thoughts, because this confuses me why people would leave tiny bits of wallpaper or whole rolls. So are they thinking that they're still going to put it up, or did they buy far too much? I mean, but they knew that when they were wallpapering their house. So why did they not return the rolls at the beginning? I'm confused. Please help me out here.
And it's common. It's really common. And so some people are like, what are they talking about with wallpaper? Honestly, we see it all the time, don't we? And not just whole rows of wallpaper, actual little offcuts with like 1/2 meter sections of cut wallpaper that have not gone to the tip at the time. And so I think that you really, again, this is about examining your own behavior in the same way with wood. The same way with paint, what would you be likely to do? So if your kids scribbled on a piece of wallpaper in your kitchen, for example, and you thought, oh, I'm going to have to replace that piece of wallpaper with something that I've got in the garage, it's a possibility. Chances are it's going to be a slightly different colour. As soon as the sun hits it, it's going to discolour it. But are you skilled enough then at that point to cut out that piece of wallpaper from one little section and put a new piece in? Now, some people are. Many people are not. And so it's about examining your own behavior, but we feel like we should keep it. That's the problem. So first things first with wallpaper. If you've got wallpaper left over from a project that you've had in your house, please do return it to the shop and get yourself some money back for it. If you are going to keep any rolls of wallpaper, make sure they're more or less a full roll so you can get a full length, but don't keep the little 1/2 meter offcuts because they're just going to be battered and creased and dirty and dusty and things like that. But in general, my take would be don't keep any wallpaper at all. But maybe that's me. I mean, we are heavy on the decluttering for some reason, aren't we, Ingrid, to be fair? Honestly. But that would be my take on it. Because I just don't know anybody who returns back to that wallpaper, if I'm really honest.
I know. It's just sometimes there's things that that go beyond me that I don't understand. So, but maybe I think we're giving sensible advice here, Leslie. That's what I'm thinking.
We are.
So
We are.
hopefully our listeners agree with us and they're like, oh yeah, I've been doing that in the past as well. You know what? We're all about keeping it real, aren't we, Leslie? We're about keeping it real and going, yes, gosh, I do that too, but what's the point in doing this? I'm going to think about this, and maybe you can create some space with our suggestions.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my take on this, whenever when we're working with people one-to-one, no one's ever said to me, do you know what? I do want to keep that 1/2 meter of wallpaper because I'm going to, I'm going to contest what you're saying. I'm going to keep it. So normally when we say, why are you keeping that wallpaper? They're like, yeah, good question. No idea why. Let's chuck it away. You know what I mean? So I think one of the things that we need to talk about really as well, though, with the garage is quite often it is there's 2 people involved or there's a family involved. And so it's not just you. It might be your wife, your husband that's making those decisions. And so, it's not just your decision. So the other person who's involved in household or DIY, whoever that is, whether that's your wife, your husband, your son, your daughter, whoever, maybe the one making the decision. And so it's not your stuff per se. It's kind of family stuff, isn't it? And so that might come into play, and no more so than the next category that we're going to talk about.
Yes. Engine oil and kind of car bits. We find all sorts, don't we? We find spray for windows, we find de-icers, we find tools to scrape ice off windows in 5-folds, empty bottles of engine oil, other bits that, machines to inflate tires. I mean, it's like, this is incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that depending on what generation you are, is going to determine how much of that stuff that you've got. I bet if you went into a 20-year-old garage now, they wouldn't have the stuff anymore. But, if you're getting 40, 50, 60, those kind of ages, you remember when we used to do our own cars all the time. Now there are people who do still fix their own cars and put oil in their own cars and maintain their own cars. But there are also, again, many, many people who leave all that to a garage and just go in for servicing and MOTs and what have you. And the garage does that for you. So again, it's about examining your own behavior. All decluttering, there's no right or wrong answer. We can give our advice, and we are here to say, just have a think about what you actually would do and what you do. Because quite often we just keep these things because we feel like we should, because our parents used to keep them. And we remember our dads tinkering around with putting oil in the engine every week. Cars have kind of moved on a little bit from that. We don't need to maintain them as much as we used to. We can't really put our own headlamp bulbs in anymore. It all has to be stripped down and put, it's more, so cars are more complicated. and probably easier to maintain. I know all the car people out there are probably like, she's talking complete nonsense. But I would never put oil in my own car. Bottom line, maybe I'm wrong. I would put the screen wash in and obviously de-icer. But other than that, there's nothing really. I don't wash my own car either. I take it to a car wash. Really think about that and think, what am I doing? Just don't always do what you've always done. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think if space is at a premium and you really need that space in your garage for other things that are important to you, don't hang on to it and be realistic of what you can and cannot do. If even putting oil or screen wash in your car gives you this dreaded feeling and think, oh my God, I really don't see myself doing this, then let all that stuff go and just be confident in putting it in the washer in your garage to have those bits done. There's no shame in that. You know what I mean? To have professionals do that for you.
And I think that is a big change. I certainly think over the last 20 years, there's been a big shift in terms of getting people in to do things in your house is more normal than it was 20 or 30 years ago. I think people used to do their own things.
Yeah.
And that's that's why things have changed. Generations change and the way we do things changes all the time.
Yeah.
So, and that takes us on to the next thing as well. So you'll see there's a really common thread with all this, which is, do you do this anymore in your house or do you outsource it to someone else to do it for you? Tools, gardening tools, household tools. Do you do things that need 27 hammers and saws and planes and things like that in your house? Or do you just have it because you inherited it from someone else and it's just there? So examine the tools as well that you've got, because we see a lot of people with serious toolboxes that I know are not doing any of those things apart from hanging a picture and maybe unscrewing something. So for some people, having a hammer, some picture hanging stuff, a Phillips screwdriver and a flathead screwdriver is more than enough for many, many houses out there. Would you agree, Ingrid?
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I was decluttering a utility room yesterday where all kind of those garage, because she didn't have a garage, so those kind of bits lived in her utility room. And we found like pieces of washing machines and pieces of radiator knobs. And she's like, well, I've got no idea. They were left over from previous jobs that we had people in for, because her husband doesn't want to do all those jobs. So she says, I'm getting somebody in to do this for me, including even masking tape. She said, I'm going to have a painter decorate several rooms in my house. I'm not going to do it myself. So why do I've got all this masking tape and why have I got all these sheets and leftover DIY stuff? Well, I just need to have an Allen key.
It's interesting, isn't it, when you think about it? But it's just one of those things that we just continue to just keep. And if you've got space in your garage, you think, you know what, it might come in or it might change. My friend at the moment, she's had someone doing her garden for years, but all of a sudden he's let her down and things like that. And so she's decided to do her own gardening. So actually she is using those tools that she's kept for years, but she's got space. And so things do change. If you've got space, don't worry about it so much. What we're always talking about with decluttering is where your space is compromised and you have to make these decisions, because the stuff that you're keeping is stopping you from keeping the stuff that you want to keep that's serving you now in your current lifestyle.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Now, if you think to yourself, oh my gosh, Ingrid and Leslie are really making me think this morning, and I need to start thinking about my own behaviors, and I would love to know more about this, we actually have a fantastic module in our bootcamp course. So if you're thinking to yourself, I actually need to have more help of Ingrid and Leslie to sort this out, check out our bootcamp, our 8-week room by room bootcamp. And one of our courses in the bootcamp is all about sorting out your garage and those outdoor and indoor kind of storage areas. And we give you loads and loads of good tips. So if you want to know more, have a look at declutterhub.com, click on the shop and have a look. Check it out.
I think the big thing really with the bootcamp that becomes, as more and more people are going through the bootcamp at the moment, it's really interesting because the big thing is, it's not the decluttering of the stuff. It's never about the stuff, is it? It's about the mindset. It's about the shift in mindset. And that's what we bring and that's what we deliver in England. Not anybody, but it's not rocket science to put things in a bin bag, but it is rocket science to think about your own behaviors, to examine them and to force a complete shift in mindset. And that's what we're all about. Yes, we want to be practical. Yes, we want you to have less stuff in your home. Yes, we want the stuff that's in your home to be the stuff that you really need. But more than anything else, and we get so excited, don't we, Ingrid, when we see, God, I'm really thinking about things completely differently. either 3 weeks into the boot camp and I've had a complete shift in mindset and the way that I'm doing things. That is success to us, isn't it, Ingrid?
So yes, Lester, because we've got a lovely testimonial the other day, didn't we, about one of our boot campers, and she said, "I'm halfway through and the boot camp, and it's mentally helped me so much to make a shift like nothing has done before. And you talk so much sense, and you've really helped me to look at things in a new way, and that has really helped me to be far more successful with my decluttering." And that has made us incredibly happy, hasn't it, Leslie, to read such a fantastic testimonial, because we see people changing their life, and that is incredible, isn't it? And we love it.
We do. You really need to have these light bulb moments, and I think certainly the boot camp, going through it room by room, gives you many of these light bulb moments, and that's what we're aiming for, isn't it? So check it out, have a look. We love it. We love doing what we do, and we want you so much to have the success and to think in the way that means that you're going to keep stuff that's going to serve you. That's what it's all about. It's not about, oh, well, I've got rid of 3 things today. That's not what it's all about. It's about really undergoing a complete shift. So anyway, let us continue on, Ingrid.
Yeah, no, we got sidetracked by our excitement about the boot camp, but we've got some more things to discuss about the garage, Leslie. So next thing then, what we see all the time in garages, outgrown toys. Loads of different forms, don't we? I mean, it can be these little walk scooters that they were on when they were 3 and they're now like 9 or 12. And you're like, oh, okay. How old are your kids? So those outgrown kind of scooters and kitchen sets to play with. I mean, we're not talking Lego here. I mean, Lego is like amazing.
Ingrid's favorite thing.
I know.
Ingrid, don't start talking about Lego, right? We have not got 20 minutes for you to wax lyrical about how amazing Lego is, by the way. I think that those toys are all about, it could come from an intentional place, which is, you know what, I'm going to rotate my children's toys. The bottom line is the toys are completely overwhelming in your house, and you're like, I need to get some of this stuff out so that, because there's too much. And so you might temporarily put them into the garage, but it is this out of sight, out of mind, and then they stay there, then they get a bit dusty and a bit manky, and then you've got to clean them all before they can come back into general use. And so there's so many reasons why toys end up in the garage, but invariably they don't come back into the house again. And so they need to go to charity shop, they need to be repurposed, they need to be given to someone else. The other thing that ends up as well as toys is things like popped paddling pools and things like that, don't they? Like, oh, we're going to fix that. We're going to put I'm going to get a fixing, what do you call those? Fixing kits or whatever for paddling pools so we can bring it back into general use. And that horrendousness of paddling pool all shoved together, because they never go back in a nice way, do they? Paddling pools, they're horrific, like beyond horrific, aren't they, to store? But they end up in this horrible mess in your garage and stay there and get all, again, a bit moldy, a bit manky.
You know what I'm always wondering, how did that fit in that tiny box when I bought it? Because even when you kind of deflate it, it's like, it is never as tiny it was ever when I bought this. It's crazy. How did it ever fit in this box? And especially with paddling pools, Leslie, we all leave them out too long, then we don't clean them properly. Then they get moldy, and then the animals, little bugs start to live in them. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is not good.
But I think at the back of our mind, of course, we're worried about the plastic, aren't we? And we're like, we can't just chuck it out. I mean, the sensible thing would be to say, keep your paddling pool for a year and then chuck it out at the end of the season. But then that's not environmentally friendly. So we worry about that. That's in the back of our mind. That's why we want to fix things. And then it's a tough one, paddling pools.
Yeah.
But we're just going to ask you to think about what that might look like. Fix it, recycle it, repurpose it. But if your kids are 18 and don't want a paddling pool anymore, maybe it's time to get rid.
Yeah, for sure. The next thing I always find in garages is furniture that used to be indoors, like a chest of drawers or something, and that's now normally always in the middle of a garage. So you keep having to walk past it all the time. It's never like next to a wall. It's always in the middle because it got carried out to the garage at one point when it was no longer needed in the house. And you found this old furniture. It can be old garden furniture, but it's also old furniture from inside the house that's replaced or outdated or half broken, but not completely sure what we're going to do with it. Are we going to fix it? Or it's big to go in a car, so it needs to be taken made smaller first. It's always those kinds of things as well, isn't it, Leslie?
Yeah, we talk all the time, don't we, about garages and lofts and basements being this halfway house where we've kind of half made a decision that we don't want it in our house anymore. But we're not quite ready to go to that final stage of actually getting rid of it. And so we put it in the garage. Sometimes, certainly with furniture and chest of drawers, shelf units, wardrobes, we think, oh, that might be quite useful in the garage. We can store things in there. But furniture from inside the house invariably is not useful storage in a garage. Whatever it is, you just need different types of storage, deeper shelves, plastic, things you can wipe down, open shelving. Wardrobes and chests of drawers and drawer units just don't tend to work in a garage. Make that decision now so that somebody else can use it. That's the thing. So many things go to waste because we've delayed our decision making, and then they're no good for anybody else then. It's such a shame, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a really, really good point that you're making there, Leslie. And I hadn't really thought about that, babe, but you're really right, because it does get kind of dusty and grotty and spider webs, and then you almost have to end up throwing it away or bring it to the recycling center, because then it's no use to anybody else. So let's move on to your next, because I know that's one of your favorite things to talk about, Leslie.
Yeah, I'm getting excited by this, all this stuff, because I think everyone's going to be like, yep, I'm going to say that out, the paint's going to go, the wallpaper's going to go, the tools are going to go. Yeah, I just think all of this is, yep, that's what I'm doing this weekend.
I think people really, people are listening to this when they're either driving or maybe when they're doing the shopping, thinking, I need to order a skip.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the next thing. Or I'm going to become a member of FreeCycle or FreeGo, and I'm going to just shift all this stuff out and create some space instead of having it all rusting away and going to waste in that garage, because it's just not good. So let's talk about the next thing then, Leslie, because that's one of your things.
It is appliance boxes. I mean, why? Just why? Can I just leave it there? Why are we keeping old appliance boxes? There's a good chance that you're not going to sell it because it's going to be really old. If you want to sell it, there are certain things for sure that are going to have slightly more value if they're in a box. But for the most part, if you're selling a television, for example, even if you did sell a television, by the time you've used it for 10 years, it's not going to be something that anybody else is going to want to buy because it's going to be outdated technology. So you can either give it away, and it's probably not going to fit in the box anyway because it's going to have a stand on it and it's all this, so it's not going to fit in the box. But people keep them because they feel that they ought to, because they think that they're going to sell them. And that's fine if you're in the habit of doing that and you know that you do sell things on or something like that, or you do trade things. But most people are keeping appliance boxes because they're nervous. You do need to keep them for a short amount of time just in case you want to return it, so if it's faulty. And so, we did some research on this, didn't we? And John Lewis, for example, which is a British store, have got a kind of policy. It's not set in stone, but they expect you to have the appliance box for about 6 weeks after you've purchased it. But we see appliance boxes for years and years, and they are big and they are bulky and they are taking up loads and loads of space that you can give over to other things in your house. So if you've got appliance boxes, be ruthless and get rid of them.
And it's so nice because they can most all be recycled.
Yeah.
And the only thing you have to do is kind of get those little bits out, those little plastic bags that are always in there, or maybe the foam that protects. You can't recycle that, unfortunately. But make sure, sometimes even the manuals are still in there. So have a look. Do I want to keep this manual or can I recycle that as well? Throw that away, recycle as much as you can, break down that box and put it in your recycling bin. And it's just, you create space like so quickly and it feels so good. There's nothing nicer than finding an empty appliance box, because immediately you create a lot of space and in like 3 seconds it's like, yay.
Appliance boxes are always, if you're decluttering a room that's full, whether it's a loft, a garage, a kind of dumping ground room, get rid of the appliance boxes first and you'll create so much more space, because sometimes that can take up 25% of a room, can't it?
Yeah.
Just getting rid of boxes. But it's awkward because sometimes they're big and it's a bit awkward getting them there, but break them down and just take them like Ingrid says.
Yes, Lexi, what you have about boxes, I have about old appliances. Old kettles, old toasters, old microwaves, phones, things with wires, even
printers.
There you go. And the recycling center takes them. They have a special box for all of these things, because people know you really shouldn't throw those away in your normal bin. So they put them in the garage, and it's just lovely. Just bring all of that stuff to the recycling center, and then you will feel better letting it go.
Definitely, completely agreed. We just have this little thing in us, which is like, oh, I know that my kettle is broken and I bought a new one, but I just in case my other one's not broken, I've decided that I need a new one. My other one's not broken, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to put the old one, just in case the new one breaks. I'm going to put the old one in the garage, and I'm going to bring it back into, after 4 years of languishing in a dirty, dusty, damp garage. If my new kettle breaks, I'm going to bring the old one back into use. Not going to happen.
No.
Not going to happen. We've already decided we don't want it because we bought a new one. It's interesting psychology, isn't it? That definitely is a light bulb moment for a lot of people. Like, yeah, that's a really good point. But again, give it to somebody while they can use it if it's still in working order. We don't necessarily need to take it to the recycling centre. A lot of these electricals that we're talking about, Ingrid, are still working. People have just decided that they want a newer version of it.
All right, Leslie, the last one then. Archival paperwork. Yes.
That archival paperwork is either well organised paperwork that we've boxed up, so things like old tax returns, old tax documentation, or business stuff that you've got to keep for several years or whatever. Or it can be random bags of paperwork that's not been sorted, envelopes that have not been opened, that have just been chucked into a bag and shoved out of sight. And so paperwork doesn't fare well generally in a garage unless it's super dry. So it's not a great place to keep paperwork. I don't really know what to say. We could talk for like 3 hours on paperwork. Yeah. All I'm going to say is we find a lot of paperwork in the garage, and that's not really the place for it.
No.
Shall we leave it at that? Shall we leave it at that? Yeah?
Yes, leave it at that. Recycle it, shred it, but you need to look at it. And that's going to be probably one of the sub-projects. If you find paperwork in your garage, that's your hint to go, okay, that's another weekend that I need to spend on my paperwork. But yes, I fully agree, Leslie. Do not store paperwork in your garage unless your garage is in your house. If it's outside and the wind and the dust and everything can get to it, your paperwork will absolutely be destroyed when you keep it there. So keep paperwork indoors. Definitely spend some more time sorting that out. Did you realize this is podcast 98 and we've got our 100th podcast? My mind's like blown. I'm going to have balloons up and everything. Seriously, I'm going to have banners. I'm going to have bunting up. Our 100th podcast, Leslie. That's kind of like a big deal. When we started, did you ever think we would make it to 100 podcasts?
When we sat around your table in London doing our first one, I can't even go back and listen to those first ones. They're probably horrific, aren't they? I don't know. I just I'm like, yeah, never. But anyway, yes, 100th episodes. So what are we planning?
Oh, we've got something quite exciting. So listen up, listeners. If you're listening to this, listen up. This is your chance to ask us questions. We are going to answer your questions in our podcast. So you can send us in your questions. Leslie and I are going to pick the best questions, and we're going to do an extended podcast. And normally our podcasts are about half an hour, aren't they, Leslie? Around about half an hour. But for our 100th episode, we are going to do an extended version of our podcast, and we're going to answer your questions. So if you're listening to this and you think, I want Ingrid and Leslie to answer my question, it can be anything, decluttering and organizing, storage. Think about anything in your house that you think, I would love to know what Ingrid and Leslie think about this. You can send in your question, and you can send it to hello@declutterhub.com. So if you're listening to this and think, oh my gosh, this is amazing, I want to ask Ingrid and Leslie a question, you can send it to us, and we're going to pick the best questions and answer them in our 100th podcast.
I know, 100. That's 100. Well, we edit them down a little bit. So that's probably like 100 hours of us talking. Like we've done a lot of talking in the last year or so, haven't we?
No, but 2 years, Leslie.
2 years.
I know.
2 years.
It's amazing. We're still like laughing and we can still chat about it, isn't it really?
I know. I'm still getting excited. Well, let's hope we're here for 200. It's a scary thought, isn't it?
I know. That is a scary thought. So now don't worry if you're driving somewhere and you think, oh my gosh, how am I going to remember this? Don't worry. We are going to remember you in our Facebook group. So if you're not in our Facebook group, come and join our Facebook group. We'd love to see you there. It's the Declutter Hub community on Facebook. We have a lovely own group and we're going to remind everybody. Now, we, of course, have our membership, our VIP membership. So our members already are used to us answering their questions. We have every 2 weeks, we've got a live Q&A where we answer our members' questions. But this is your opportunity to ask us what you've always been dying to know.
Yes, exciting times. So, yeah, only 2 weeks to go.
I know. So
100.
exciting. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited. So I'm going to have the bunting up, honestly. So listeners, have you enjoyed this podcast? We hope you are inspired to take action and we really appreciate you listening today. And if you think to yourself, wow, this was fantastic. I want other people to know about Ingrid and Leslie too. Share our podcast. You can find the sharing buttons in the show notes on our website. So we put our podcast on the website, is on our website as well, declutterhub.com. You can click on podcast and you can listen in there. Now, if you want to find and get more handy tips from Leslie and me, you can find us in lots of places. We've got the Facebook group, like I mentioned, but we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we have a Facebook page, and you can find us at Declutter Hub. And if you want to know more about our membership, take a look at members.declutterhub.com to find out more. If you don't want to miss the next episode, subscribe to the Declutter Hub podcast, and it will pop into your notifications each Friday. We've been asking for reviews and we've been loving reading your reviews. So do share with us a review if you'd like to tell us what you think about the podcast. Thanks so much for listening and see you next time.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Declutter Hub podcast. Check out declutterhub.com for more inspiration and don't forget to tune in next week.